Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Omar Erchid. I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Ramy Nasr, and you are with us on episode 6 of the RizqMDJD podcast. And today we are joined by our first esteemed guest for the podcast series. We're honored to have Brother Almir Colan all the way from Australia. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Almir.
Alaikum assalam. Happy to be with you.
So, Brother Almir, just a short bio. He's a leading voice in the Islamic finance and ethical investing. He serves as the director of the Australian Centre for Islamic Finance. He's a member of AOFI's working group on Sharia standards. And he's also the founder of Muslim Money Matters and the host of the Islamic Finance podcast, which both me and Ramy are avid listeners to, where he educates audiences on faith-based financial principles and responsible wealth management. He has a background in both academia and business. He bridges the gap between traditional Islamic economics and today's financial world. And we're glad to have him here today, inshallah, for our episode titled The Islamic Financial System.
And I'm just going to throw in that I'm particularly very excited to have Ustad Cholan with us. Ustad Cholan, I know in Islam generally we're not like comfortable with, excessive praise, etc. But I have to say that Ustad Cholan really gets me excited, because he goes well beyond, traditional, this is halal, this is haram, this is right, this is wrong, but more of stepping back and think about the big picture. Think about what is the goal, the aim of Islam. What is the purpose of what we're doing? What are we trying to achieve? And also just from a very intellectual standpoint, economy, economics, production, from an ummatic mindset. And that's something that I think it's easy to get nitty-gritty on a specific ruling, but sometimes you can get tied up in the weeds and lose focus of the entire forest. And so at least for me, mashallah, may Allah subhanahu reward him and give him barakah and sustain him, inshallah. He's been kind of like one of the inspirations and things that open my mind to how you can think about Islamic economics and finance in a much broader and wider picture. And that's why I was very, very happy and interested to see if he can join us. Alhamdulillah, he was very gracious enough to give us from his time. So jazakallah kulla khair.
So Ustaz, I know
you're very kind.
No, I'm being 100% genuine.
I'm a little curious, Ustaz. Are you based in Sydney or a different city?
I'm actually in Melbourne.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been in Melbourne, but it's a lovely city, much different from Sydney, much more calm and relaxed, and the weather is very unpredictable here. But it's more fun than Sydney in terms of the weather. They say in Melbourne, if you don't like the weather, wait for 5 minutes.
They say something similar about Florida. Is it also in the southeast, so not too far from Sydney?
Yeah, it's the south. Yeah, the Sydney is more sort of on the east side. If you wanna, this is more on the south. Both on the both large cities. I don't know now what is the number, like 5 million, maybe 6, but it's quite large. The typical household is the house on the piece of land, and you have a bit of a backyard. People like they to live in suburbs and have a barbecue, play cricket, as they call it. The game I never understood until now, but it's a nice, easygoing country, nice people, and it's actually often when I talk to the people where you live, I say to them, it's at the end of the world,
Yeah.
and that's what they know. The Australia is at the end of the world, and they know kangaroos are there.
Well, you're quite far from the saltwater crocodiles, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But we have big snakes, which are, if you watch the famous man, Crocodile Dundee. And Steve Irwin. They made Australia famous for their crocodiles, in not around Melbourne, but in certain parts, but also big snake, dangerous animals. And even in the sea, we have those stingrays, very dangerous. Steve had an encounter, and unfortunately ended fatally for him. It's a lovely country, lovely nature, interesting history. Not just. I didn't think about this, but to talk. But actually, even with the Muslims, Australia has very interesting history, because you see, when the Muslims were navigators, they were travelers. They used to travel. Arab traders used to go around the world, and they would map terrains. And there is a very famous map made by Khwarizmi, who mapped that known world at his time. Khalifa gave him money, geographers, and they would map the world. And so they would explore. So Muslims reached Indonesia, this area, in the 12th century, and they were traders. They impressed upon people with their ethics and business dealings, which made entire country, or this whole region, embrace Islam between 12th and 15th century. And we're talking now in this region between Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, like 300 million plus Muslims. So then these Muslims started traveling in 1600s to Australia, 1600s. And these were the first people who actually came to Australia before Captain Cook. So these were from Makassar, Sulawesi traders, and then they would bring, bring the goods, and there was a particular type of product, sea cucumber, that they would smoke here and export to China. They would work with the Aboriginal people here. That was 200 years before Captain Cook. And so, through business and trade, they sort of set great example, unlike when other actors came who actually exacted very forceful displacement. There was a genocide in Australia. There was a lot of unfortunate events that led to the what we call stolen generation, where a lot of these children from indigenous people were forcefully removed from the family, and they were separated, and they were forced to convert and live in different families and so on. So Australia government later apologized and so on, but it has always left me thinking about Muslim contribution as a builders, as a positive force, and through trade and knowing each other. We have wonderful stories now where indigenous people in many parts of the country still, when they converted to Islam, or their grandfathers, they did lose later Islam because of the when Australia got federated, they stopped these kind of links between the countries in Australia, but they still know some traditions, or the way that they bury their dead, they wrap them in the white, or they say, my father used to say something, Allahu Akbar, something, or grandfather. And so it was a very interesting story that Australia has with the broader Muslim world.
Well, you reminded me when you were saying that. I was trying to look it up to find the source for it, but there's I don't think it was too long ago, they found like a coin from, like, I want to say if I can find it, I'll say it, but it was like
about 1600s ago,
it's like 1600s,
even before.
Wow. Even before that. And the coin said something like
La ilaha illallah, or something.
Allahu Akbar, or La ilaha illallah Muhammad, or something like that, and it had like the head of like the tribe king in some part in Africa or something, and it's showing that the Muslim traders had been there. The article was actually talking, because it was written from a Australian kind of centric perspective, that it was rethinking their entire thought process of how long ago traders and other people had come before Cook and etc. And it was the Muslims who had established trade routes between them.
That's fascinating. I had no idea.
I made a documentary actually about it about almost 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
When we had a very racist government here. who were saying to the Muslims, if you don't like it, leave it. And so with a couple of my friends, I financed and produced a documentary which basically delve in this history to show that Muslims were here before what you consider these, the Captain Cook and his, and later on what happened. Muslims have been here building, contributing in a very positive way, unlike some other people. And so, and this was, one of my friends is now writing a book about it, soon to be published. So for us, this kind of a history is not just one-off. It's everywhere. It's in the present and everywhere. It's almost like a roadmap. This is who we are. This is how we deal. And you can check our history. When Muslims were at the top or part of something at any time, they had the power. They could do whatever they want. There was no CNN. There was no Twitter. They never done what many people claim today, and the fear mongering. So yeah, that was a very exciting project. I love history, love learning from it.
So if you still have that documentary, the link to that, I think that'd be great.
If that's on YouTube, we'll send that over to us. We'll link it in the description.
Yeah, we'll link it up. It'd be great to see that. These discussions we have similarly here in America. I mean, subhanAllah, not just like the slaves, many of the Muslims, we know the famous names like Kunta Kinte, etc. But there's like a rich history. I remember even watching, I don't remember if it was like PBS or something like that, special talking about how the Muslims had been here, and the only reason Christopher Columbus was so sure he can get here is because he had the maps and the compasses from the Muslims and from China, and that's why he knew it was a destination he was already going to. He wasn't trying to discover anything. He already knew they had been there, and that's why you have like these old towns in even in America. We have towns called Philistine, Muhammad in Turkish. Where do these names come from? I think. Brother, what's his name? It'll come to me in a moment.
Abdul Hakim Quick, I think.
Oh yeah, that's it. Abdul Hakim Quick, who talks about that, and he'll say, like, for example, like Honolulu, how to get its name. It's from Honolulu. This is where pearls are found, and things like that. And I don't want to get off topic, but like, there's so much postulation about like where these names and histories come from. It's because it was founded here. And to kind of bring it full circle, I still remember, unfortunately, it is what it is, but right after September 11, I think it was in Newsweek magazine, if I'm not mistaken, there was a comic. And there's a traditional white Anglo-Saxon guy, and he's looking at someone that's dressed in like a turban and a thobe, whatever, and it's like, hey, you, go back to where you came from. And the guy looks at him and says, like, I forget what city, but it's like Tulsa, like, or Cincinnati, whatever. And then there's another one similar where there was like, hey, you guys need to, like immigrants, you need to leave. And then there's a Native American standing behind the white guy and saying, okay, we'll help you pack. It's like,
so Ustaz Almir, you said 20 years ago that you did this documentary. It's obvious that you've been active for decades now, mashallah. And we were wondering, we know that I believe you're originally from Bosnia, correct?
That's right.
So are you from Sarajevo, the capital?
That's correct.
Yep. So from Sarajevo to Australia, tell us how that happened and how you found yourself in the Islamic finance realm.
So I was born in Sarajevo. I lived in the old town. Beautiful part, very charming. Went to school there, and we had a war in the 90s there, and unfortunately, everything got interrupted. I had my family, my brothers, your memory, your childhood, your dreams, everything there. I often talk to the people, especially men in particular. The place where you're born, where you have roots, that never leaves you. I think I find that men have much harder time moving anywhere else. No matter where you are, the part of you where you are born, where you have your first memories, I think there is something to do with the roots, and that you as a man have a sense of protecting and going back to. I think that's very unique for men. Of course, women would have, but I found, looking at my grandparents, for example, when they came, me and my wife, other families. The men in particular that have this attachment that does not leave them. And I often think about that aspect of the men having that extra way and sensitivity about where they belong and what is their land, and how that frames everything when they look, when they think, when they fight for that, and when they feel even entitled to it. There is a sense of that, and I think that comes from the man being Qawam, somebody who is tasked with protecting. There is an instinct that thinks more about it, where you are grounded, where, when I think even for my wife or other, it's more about protecting the people or surroundings where you are. So that sort of versus under the house, roots, foundations, where you are. And so I do have very strong attachment. I try to go there, even though I'm not living anymore inside of Bosnia. But the memories, everything that you think that defines you, that you find interesting, or from the culture, from the colors, from the food to the the look, design, everything sort of feels very much like home. It's and I think that's for many of the people place where they are born and they feel deeply in themselves. So leaving that after the war finished, and I wanted to study, wanted to do things. I was a bit injured in the war and so on. It was definitely not easy to start at another place. Find yourself in new surrounding, learn language, learn the customs, learn what is going on. Things that you cannot quantify, the social life, connections, how we interact, mannerisms of the people, where you find joy. Like in back home, we visit each other, we just knock on the door and enter, here you have to make appointment. Are you scared, September 31st, at 7 o'clock, is that, 3 days, like
calendar invite,
months, calendar, everything is like, okay, forget it then, I go to Bosnia, me and my brothers, we just sit, eat, drink coffee, you don't, no one thinks along those lines, it's, so what you value, in terms of friendship, relationships, it's a different than here. Sometimes you don't know the neighbor, what's his name, what they do, and this fragmented life. So moving here, of course, has its own benefit, has its own positives and negatives, just like anywhere else. But alhamdulillah, moving here from 96, so it will be now 30 years almost. That I moved, 5 kids later, my daughter just gave birth, so became a grandfather now. It's a bit more interesting, Sometimes I reflect on some of the statements that people say in line with this, what I was just saying, that something become home where you bury your family members, where you bury the people before you who came. That's when that starts becoming your home. And but as I talk to my daughter and other people, I say to them, when we came here 30 years ago, there was no that social network and infrastructure, and then you have to learn so many things and make so many mistakes, versus where now you have kids, you have a family, you have a community, and when now you are raising your children or you are engaging in the world and everything, you have a much more supportive network around you. And as I said, Australia is a great country. Australia people are very easygoing. Just like any other country, there is always some fringe people here and there. But overall, you interact with people. They're just worried about their own life. They want to live well, and they are. And Australia is good neighbor to many of the countries. Although there is that internal conflict Are we part of Asia? Do we look up to America or Europe, or how do we deal sometimes with our neighbors? And we have a great, as I said, neighborhood. A lot of these countries, they look up to Australia. Australia is huge. Australia is very sophisticated in many ways. We are a country of just under 30 million people, but we produce food for hundreds of millions of people. And most of that food is halal, actually, food. We have a halal, Australia is number 2 producers of halal food in the world. And that you have hundreds of Australian companies that export halal food around the world, you know. And so this produce jobs in Australia, sets Australia to be a very important player in this location where you talk about the largest Islamic country, Indonesia, here. You know, we have a great relationship now. We just had a new government re-elected, and first trip that Prime Minister is making is to Indonesia as our neighbor country. You know, it's not just economic partner, but it's also a security partner. You know, between us and China is Indonesia and many of these other countries, and more aggressive expansionist policy, if ever is exacted by China, we will need to cooperate in this region. So I find myself here. I went to university here, studied. I was not thinking about economics and finance as an area. I was thinking engineering. I was thinking technology. I like these sorts of things a lot. But you start realizing that to understand how things move in society, how things get done, that there are different components of the system that are at work, and you know, the money, how the decisions are made, how decisions are incentivized, how society is organized. These kinds of things require a little bit more strategic look, and I think about it, and I talk to the people. The way I frame it is like in a game of chess. What is it that, as a result of your moves, where you want to end up? And you know, in the game of chess, you don't just move things in a sense that I want to win. Everybody want to capture the king, right? That's understood. But what is the game? You know, what is what are you trying to do? And in the game of chess, the whole purpose of your moves and tactics is to control the center. You know, there are 4 squares in the middle of the board that you want to control. And so from that you have the winning, your odds of winning, they increase. And so where in our life is this center when we come, personally in our life, what is that center that we want to be at, or as a community or as a country? And so defining this for each one of us as a community or individual, where should our economy be? What should my personal role be? We sometimes in our history, in our tradition, we have a story of Yusuf alayhi salam and his involvement in seeing, having the foresight to see events that are coming, and putting certain foundational structures and responses in a society that will make it resilient to whatever is coming next. And first of all, I think, do we have this foresight to see what is coming our way? Can we imagine even the outcomes of our actions? Can we connect the dots on a larger scale, especially when everything is so connected? You know, the Trump putting the tariffs on China puts tariffs indirectly on Australia, because what China is exporting to America is coming from Australia in the form of raw material. Australia is a huge exporter of iron ore and other minerals and so on. And so how does that, I sit on some of the investment committees, and one of the things we are immediately discussing, we just recently sold some assets, and the discussion was, we have a 3 investment managers, and we are analyzing their strategy to invest the cash from the sale of this asset. And the key question was, how do you understand? Like my question to three of them is, how do you understand the impact of what is happening with the tariffs now? You know, given uncertainty, volatility, how are you just thinking about it? I just want to understand, like, before we go into which asset class to invest and, you know, 30% here and 20% there, and like, do you have a view of, should you hold on, should you wait, should you like so all of these things kind of fascinate me, how we are interconnected. And so going back to the point of Yusuf alayhi salam, is that you need to develop certain foresight, you need to have developed certain critical thinking. It's not all just going to be, let me ask ChatGPT. ChatGPT just gives you the most average of the thinking. You know, it's not going to give you the edge, and certainly not going to be creatively imagining. Anybody who thinks that they are being creative with ChatGPT is just somebody who doesn't understand what's going on. The foresight to see something new is not going to be given to you by mathematical probability on which AI operates. The AI cannot go outside of its own probability game. It's a game of averages. It's a game of calculating what's already in the past. And so if you want to look at the future, it's your gut feeling, it's your instinct, build on a lot of data training of your mind, of your intuition. And so this is something that is almost like how people used to have in the olden days, you know, like Farasa, they used to call reading the face, and knowing. Now you're reading the map of the world, let's say economy. And so then you think about, okay, how do we respond to this as a society, as a leadership? And another documentary I made was about 20 years of President Erdogan's economic leadership. And misunderstanding a lot of people have about his decisions. And that is because decision he was making, he had that foresight, and he has that foresight to see exactly. And it turning out every day since the documentary, and I took a long time to study Turkey's economic policies and what they have been doing, and I talked to the business people, visited the factories, visited the cities, visited the Department of Finance and talked to them. More and more, even after the documentary and now, and things are unfolding, I see this is the modern day example of the Yusuf alayhi salam. You know, at that time, you can imagine, you know the story, when you can imagine when Yusuf was saving those grains and saying, keep it this way, that way. People might be saying, what monetary policy is this? What economic model is this? This doesn't make sense. You know, we have less now. But there is always some kind of a trade-off. There is always something that you see the wisdom a little bit later on. And I think now, a few years ago, they were saying, oh, Turkey is nothing, they don't know what they're doing. This is not orthodox economics. And all right, well, look at them now. Look at them now. You had a conflict in Pakistan and India recently. Well, whose drones and whose military system other than Chinese was there in operation? Who is now meeting in Istanbul and mediating between Ukraine and Russia, and America is now trying to get into that meeting. Who is now building the bases in Syria, providing them with all the infrastructure to transform their economy, agriculture economy, manufacturing inside the country, providing with electricity, providing them even in terms of intelligence and everything else, regional stability for the countries and so on. Like you see one after another thing, this little country that everybody was saying, what are they doing? You see the outsized impact on stability of the world. And that's why President Erdogan, look at the respect he has. President Trump, respect he has. This is my friend. Now in when they were in, I think, Riyadh now, in the Saudi, when I was watching him, President Trump, President of Syria, Crown Prince, and Erdogan was on the phone. You know, like it shows the significant weight of power that and the game that he was successfully playing as a country that is really stabilizing the region. Why they are now negotiating peace between Ukraine and Russia? Because they did the same in Africa. They are stabilizing force in Balkans. They're stabilizing force in other countries. Force for good, force that is expanding economically and so on. And so when you see now that country going and opening defense, let's say, and economic ties with Indonesia, with Pakistan, and so on, and acting as a stabilizing force, it's a great way to say, well, that is what real leadership today looks like in a volatile world, in a war that is at the brink of always another war, and there are countries that act as a strategic destabilizers. You need to have people who will be stabilizing, who will have enough foresight and wisdom and power to bring this world together. And so that's why I often think Muslims need to be involved to prevent some harm, to bring about benefit, to bring about cooperation. We see that more and more, what they call, whether it's a global south or these countries, there is a need for leadership. United Nations and all of these countries, and I know everything about United Nations from Bosnia, how ineffective that's the worst organization in the world if you want to prevent the war or genocide. You know, we had Srebrenica in Bosnia where they were United Nations troops and yet genocide happened. They let it happen. They actually exited and submitted the town Srebrenica to the General Ratko Mladic, who Ratko Mladic, to commit that same genocide, you know. And so when we have let's say President Erdogan saying the world is bigger than five, that we need more than just these 5 Security Council countries to keep the world safe. I think that Muslims have to have in their own capacity, whether it's their own neighborhood or the same kind of a foresight to see what is coming, what can I do to make this better, that I can stabilizing. So that role as a Yusuf alayhi salam, I think it's something that we can play. Went a little bit off but you know, between these two things, yes, I came from Bosnia to Australia. It's a beautiful country. We try to give our contribution, and Australia is really very much connected, and we wanted to stay connected to the rest of the world and influence even the relationships with other countries, because I don't think it's a very good to have countries trying to assert and force and coerce others. It does not lead to the good outcomes. You know, there has to be some balance. Everybody is armed. Everybody has got non-nuclear. Everybody, you know, the provocations, the what we see in Gaza. You know, it's a huge red line. Should be a huge red line that, you know, we are turning away from the catastrophe. You know, it's just unacceptable that, you know, you could have something like that be happening, and you know that this is going to lead even to more conflict, if not so. So this is why I think being sensitive, being responsive, being able to do something for me has been occupying my mind, and that's why I guess economics and finance is a way of framing and thinking, because they say often follow the money. You know, why they say that? Because often these incentives, you know, the wars that are fought incentivize industrial military complex to act. You know, we in Bosnia say to some it's a war, to somebody it's a brother. You know, it's very hard to translate what it means. But for somebody it's a war, for somebody it's basically profit. It's a good thing for some people. And so I wanted to have a sort of a frame of how do I look at these levers of power? Where does the power end? How do we get to be on that table? How do we get some way to influence what's happening? So I got very much fascinated in terms of understanding the world around me through that economic lens.
No, thank you for that. I think it was an appropriate tangent to take. Was there a specific moment or experience that pushed you to pursue where Islam and economics intersect?
It was slowly coming to me as I started to learn small rules, like specifically on riba. I think riba was very interesting for me because it's one of those things that you just think about, oh, here is another prohibition. Doesn't make sense. Why prohibit something like this? Why make it into the war? Why make it one of the devastating sins? And then, it's just something that like, why such a transaction would have such a major consequences, and then I thought, if I cannot figure it out on the merits, like by observing reality, then it must be that my imagination is not that strong. I'm not seeing the full impact, full moving parts. And so I started thinking about those verses that Allah has prohibited, interest and allowed trade, and this is. So and then the rules. I started learning the rules in my class here at the local mosque and so on. I thought that there must be a logic to these rules. Why this is so? So that took me a little bit on intellectual journey to try to frame this, because I knew that there must be a wisdom. It's not just going to be for no reason here we cannot do this and this. And so more you discover, more you dig into these things, you start discovering that, for forever, people, since the human being started, they hated these bankers, money lenders. The debt was seen as some major evil, destroying communities. People used to say that you can conquer the country in two ways. One is by sword, another one is by debt. Our scholars used to talk about that as a worry, humiliation during the day and worry in the night. It's something that starts with a worry and then ends with a war. Some of the companions used to say. And so, there has to be a reason. There has to be a reason why these things are happening, why you have a monetary systems and organizations that suck all of this money from the poor country that are perpetually in debt. Up to the system where you have policies by government to control your economy and the prices through interest rates. I mean, we recently had election here, and I was talking to one of the candidates. She is not Muslim, but she ran as independent in my area here, and her family is one of the longest families in this area, and she ran the businesses. Very powerful family in terms of business in government. Many of them in all levels of the government, very influential. And when she was elected, she was 3 times mayor of this area. And she was the first female elected in that position with the highest number of the votes, about 82 or 84%. And so I was talking with her and her team, and I... Actually, it was her sister. I later on had a deep conversation about the monetary system. I said, isn't it interesting that we have a system where you have a government say to the people, your milk and bread is getting expensive. What we're going to do? We have a great solution. We're going to increase the interest rates. Like think about that.
Yeah.
The price of the basic food is going up.
Yeah.
we call it inflation, right?
Yeah.
And how we're going to solve that? We'll increase your home loan will be increased. Now you'll be paying more to the bank. Okay, like how's that?
Yeah.
How does that make sense? And think about it in this word. Don't think about it in economics, because economics will start saying, okay, now the money goes here, there's money less there, and then price will go down.
Yeah.
Sure, right? We get that part. But think about this. That only works, number one, if you don't include the price of your home loan in the price of inflation. Because you are ignoring that the inflation is happening with the home loan, yet you are excluding it from the calculation.
The definition.
So from the definition, what is inflation, right? Because if you put that also, all of it in the what is the inflation, then you're just shifting the price from one to another. But think about more moral and ethical issue here. You now have a loan with the bank, which you took 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And somebody is saying, you know that loan that you took, I want more, that you pay me more for it. It's like, I bought this cup, okay? I bought this cup for $5 a year ago. And now, producer of that cup comes and you say, you know that cup that you got 5 years ago, 2 years ago, for $5, can you give me another $5 for it? Why? Does that make sense? Who goes from the past to present and say, you know what you purchased before, now you need to give me more? So you have a teacher who is already paying 25% of their salary for the home loan. And you say, you know what, another 10% should come to pay that home loan. And why? So that you don't have money to buy that other stuff, and therefore that will drive the price down. So that is the mechanism by which we are controlling the price. We are not actually increasing the food or milk or produce. We are just wiping out people who can participate in that. We are then squeezing the businesses so that they cannot employ people, so that there will be some people who are unemployed. That's the actual mechanism by which increasing the interest rates acts on the economy to exclude people from participating and reducing demand for the products.
And
the supply stayed the same.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it also only works if you continue to print more money.
It can technically work even without it. It can work without it. You just basically, what you are doing, you are, when you increase interest rates, what happens is the cost of capital increases. So there is less of it in the economy. People will not borrow. I will not take loan to finance my business. You know, if I want to swipe the card, pay with the card for groceries, interest rate is now higher, so I will not buy
as much. Yeah.
So it can work without it. Like in fact, printing money adds to that inflation. Why we have that for large commodities is that you are now printing a lot of money, you're putting in circulation for another reason. That's another whole, issue of debasing the currencies, which our scholars used to say that government should never mint the coins, let's say, or create a currency in a way beyond its true value, where it starts debasing the currency in the circulation, which is why the currency in Islam should be something that serves the people, because it acts as a judge of the commodities. And so think about a judge in society, Supreme Court judge. That tells us what is what. It gives a judgment, final verdict on what is what. Well, who pays for that judge? We as a society. It's not a corporation. It's not a person. It's not for the profit of the government that judge judges. Think of the money in economy as the judge. That money needs to be non-for-profit, paid by the people to serve the people, not to be a means of government to make benefit or money or anything. It's a radically different concept. It would exclude private currencies. It would exclude government-manipulated currencies. It will exclude all of these things other than really money-serving people, just like judiciary serves people, independent in judging. prices of the goods or this, and you don't bring the judge on the ground and start trading in judge and buying and selling judges, and so on. So when you start, framing this economic issues, and people start seeing. I now forgot what was the question that you asked, but I went maybe a little bit off. But like when we were talking to these principles, simple economic principles to these people, they get it. It's just that they don't have anywhere else to go. Like what are the principles they're gonna go back to? They don't have any principles. They don't have this is halal, this is haram, this is ethical, this is unethical. What is ethical now for the Christian, atheist, Buddhist, or is there commercial transaction in there that is not right?
It's almost
what is it?
It's almost like an inability to think outside of this paradigm of what we're used to, and interest just being a part and parcel and it's taken for granted.
The only
almost.
solution. It's almost like you have
That's
a
correct.
machine that controls so many things, and you have one lever. There's only one lever you know how to use. Yeah. It's the interest, and that's it. There's no other types of transactions you know how to engage in.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to capture it, that you don't have abilities or the tools to think about and to frame this. And, if you ever read the book 1984 by Orwell, one of the things that society does is they reduce language and start to simplifying it to the point where the language is so simple that it cannot express complex ideas. And the reason for this is that you cannot think about and frame and think about what is going around you. You can just basically say, oh, this is good or extra good, double good, or this is bad, double extra bad. Like you don't have any more sophistication to form thoughts.
Yeah.
It's just so simple, like the kids meme, memes or emojis.
Yeah.
You can't form the sentence with a
yeah.
couple of emojis. Everything is thumbs up or thumbs down.
There's like 50.
Or double extra.
There's like 50 face emojis. Come on.
That's right. Yeah, and that's exactly what 1984. It's like they have a root word like a good, and then they have a level of good. So why have all of these other words when you can have that? So based on the strength of you just have a face. So basically, every comment on your WhatsApp is just how on the scale of I like it. And so what that does to the person, how will I then communicate idea? How will I express where I am or what is going on? How will I tackle this? So this reduces the person to very simple. And when you think about what is language, what is the first thing that humans were honored with to deal with the challenges, right? Allah taught our grandfather the language. Language as a way of communicating, framing, crystallizing your thought. It's this knowledge. He asked, okay, let you tell me the names of these things. What? Well, they don't have names. They don't have names for the concept. They don't have ideas for it. They don't have building blocks to think about. So our grandfather had these things. And so that's why even the first word is read. Allah created a pen, and so, even when you go to university, I remember working on curricula, especially for first year university students versus later years. You go to university first year, assessments are not about you learning engineering or medical things and whatever. The first year assessments really are just about making sure that you can communicate, that you can express yourself, that you can write that essay. The later on, as you learn, you start technical knowledge. And then in the later stage, applied knowledge, how you apply it to the situation. So there is evolution. The core of it is language, communication. Are you able to get the information, grasp it, and are you able to communicate it? Because that is the core. That's why in Australia, for example, when we were working in some schools on the career development program here, and we analyzed what is the number one requirement for university entrance here. It was your score in English language. For every university, that is the one prerequisite that is constant, that doesn't change. And then you have your, physics, subjects, mathematics, and depending what you study. But the language is the constant, regardless. And so here we have a situation where what we are losing, and so beside the language, the concept of ethics, what is now to build this language on? What am I believing? Where does the ethics come from? Well, it's come from the root, what you believe in. You understand? That's how we create a culture. That's how we create the norms. We sometimes underestimate, the mother, just like treating your parents kindly, this and that. Well, that is very important principle in which you build, or no cheating, or something very simple. Generosity, or being content, being grateful, concept that there is more to the wealth than just a number written on the note. There is an invisible written barakah of that same money, that you need to factor in your calculation. Who has these tools to deal with these challenges that we have, to say that this is right or wrong? So these prohibitions that we have in our Islam, and these rules that we have, they are not just surgically precise. They are the guide. They are so, and that's why I think you asked me why I think this is how we started, is because I could sense that these rules and the wisdom is so great. That most of us lost this, especially we lost it in the institutional form, in the government form. It is now maybe living in individual level, where your own religiosity or your own iman is, telling you, I'm not going to do this and that. But on a system level, it's not institutionalized. And for me, that was something that bothered me a little bit, when it comes to the countries or the businesses, how they run, or the system, how is the setup. Because one of the aims of the Sharia is protection of the wealth. Now, why have protection of the wealth if that is not important? If the wealth is not important, why have an aim, maqasid of Sharia, to protect the wealth if it is not important?
Yeah,
and so this is how I got basically interested. Long story short.
I told you, it doesn't disappoint, mashallah. Like, it's fun. I'm just thinking while you're talking, I'm like, we're throwing out all this like ayat and hadith, and we're talking about like, think about it, this thing. But like, I don't know if this is normal how it is, but at least in nowadays age, I feel like we need to be taught how to think in the first place, how to step back and look at things, because I think we're almost like an autopilot, just take things for granted as they are, and not to like really step back and look at them. Like when Cholan was talking about the chessboard and the four spots on the board that you have to control, and Omar and I think I'd mentioned this to you. Omar and I had like an offline discussion about like trying to make some like basic efforts or moves, or trying to like organize and bring our community together on the same page, inshallah, so we're working in the same direction, whatever. But like he said this, I'm like, I don't even know what those 4 points are. Like I don't even know what are the essential core items that we must control so that we can help guide our situation in a better direction, let alone not be on the back foot. Because like subhanAllah, you mentioned Australia being a huge exporter of halal meat. We mentioned this in the last episode, actually. The whole point was about Islam wants us to be producers. You had mentioned many times in your talks that Hadith of Rasulullah, the upper hand is better than the lower hand. The best thing you could do is that what you do with your hands, etc. And so like we're in a situation where we're always discussing right now about what we can divest from, what we can boycott. We're on the back foot. That's like you're in the soccer game. It's last half, 10 minutes left, you're down 3 goals and you're trying to play defense. The problem is we're on defense. We should have been on the offense in the first place. You don't need to divest. You don't need to boycott if you already have your own products. If you ever have your own options, this is like kind of the backward scale. And so it just made me think. It's like, yeah. So do we have an organization? And I can't speak generally, but just from my minimal interaction in my community, and I've lived in a couple different communities, but I've never sat down in a community and be like, hey, listen, we have this global, or not even global, we have this citywide or regional mindset for our community as Muslims to develop and to progress. We need to control these certain factors. We need to be at this, they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And then the other thing that came to my mind too is like, this is the embodiment of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجْتَ لِلنَّاسِ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. You are the best nation released unto mankind. What is the precondition? You order the good and forbid the evil. And you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So
just on that verse, let's pause. Like you said, we sometimes go quickly over things. Let's pause on that verse, for example, just so that we can actually see what you were saying before, how critical thinking and paying attention is very important. This verse we recite all the time, right? Always we say the same thing, okay? But think about, to do that verse, you order good and you prohibit evil, right? That requires certain level of authority to do that. Like you mentioned, you have to be on the table. Well, you have to be on not just authority, but you need to be at the table where those decisions are made.
Yeah.
You understand?
100%.
And so if you think about what has happened to us in last several decades, all pillars of our strength were demolished systematically. Every country, every leader, everything around the world has been knocked down. And so your resulting situation where you can have a genocide happening in the middle of the Muslim countries is a result of all the pillars of strength being knocked down one after another, and you're not just being on the table or menu, or you are nowhere to be seen. So for you to even say I'm calling for something, you have to understand how you got to that situation. Often people talk about when it talks, this example of menu or on the food or something. Oh, look at the lobby groups and Control America. Here's 100 million they throw. Do you think that America is controlled by $100 million lobby group, given a couple of thousands or a couple of millions for this one or that one?
Much bigger picture.
We would be now, the three Middle East countries by now would be controlling America 100 times over by amount of money that they just spent over this last week. If the money was the controlling aspect. So all this to say to you, what you were saying before, is that we need to challenge our assumptions, the way we think whether money or power works or how that system works. And the very easy answers always are not the most correct. Oh, well, they pay these politicians. Okay, you pay them. Okay, you want $100 million? Okay, I'll give you $100 million. Let's see next election if you can control everything with $100 million. It's not going to happen. Oh, they succeed because they have these banks, or they succeed because they have this. There is more at play. There is more that is happening that you need to break down. And I think the simplistic solution that makes us feel better are easy go-to zone. Even yesterday, we had a recently election in Australia, and there was a team debrief for one of the candidates, and I was facilitating discussion, and I asked them, okay, so you as a team now went and you did your campaigning, and this was a part of this whole let's put accountability on the government for inaction on what's been happening in Palestine, and let's raise the voices and so on, and mobilize the Muslims who often been told they are just not ever going to be able to organize and never going to take the power. They were kind of reduced to token, caricature, minority who should sit in the corner and be silent, basically. And so when they did finally mobilize, yesterday I was talking to them, and I said, what was it that you think now you achieved? Like, what was the impact, how you see it? And on one side, what was very impressive to me is to see people change their attitude from not even considering the outcome as a benchmark of success, as in judging themselves on, did I activate myself? Did I become active? Regardless of the outcome, that percentage-wise, the votes and so on, which was great. We had several candidates across Australia, huge swings against the government and so on. But people started measuring their action based on, I have actually moved, I have started doing something. And one person said very rightfully that if I want to be relevant, I need to have some power in my hands. Like what I have now is the votes and this and that. And I said, look, that's the first step to really think of you as an actor, and you think about power as something that is like a weight in your hand. How much weight you have. Yeah. So when you are then negotiating, if you want to be at that table you mentioned, okay, what are you bringing on the table? What is the power? What is the something that you will bring on the table?
Value.
Are you coming empty-handed? And can you put a weight on it? And so this table is this power brokers are sitting. And so what can you do? One of the scholars used to say, you are only as relevant as much as you can interrupt others in their plans. Because that's the power. That's the power. Yeah. When I bring my thing, I can interrupt something. I can push my thing or I can stop your thing. That's what the basis of it. And then we negotiate based on what we have in our hands. Okay? And so for this to happen, a deeper, more precise conversation needs to happen beyond just usual how it sometimes go escape routes. Oh, they have a big structure, they have something on the top, and then they just control it as if you can't do anything, and it doesn't break it down into the, okay, this is a watermelon, we're not going to eat it in one go, we're going to slice it into pieces. So what is the first piece? What is the second piece? Where am I going with these kinds of things? So I agree with what you're saying, and I do hope that we do learn that critical thinking, especially now when everything is sort of served. You just type in everything in the chat GPT and sort of, even at the end of the meeting, we had the board and everybody was writing it down. And this morning somebody texted the summary of the meeting. And after this, I'm going to respond, like, you see, the problem when you take a screenshot and feed it to ChatGPT to summarize you is it loses the essence of, this is not the essence of what we had, all of these, blah, blah, blah. This is all fluff. The core of these, what you want is that, number one, people understand that they have a power, that they can get the power, and that makes them relevant. The second thing is people actually, when they are in the process of that power, they now, I have one person tell me yesterday, before this process, I will go to work and I will be, not presenting myself as a Muslim, and now as a result of engagement, being loud, proud, and telling me as a Muslim want this from the government, this encouraged me so much, it shaped my identity. I'm not silent about being Muslim. I can now totally differently see myself. Another person said that as a result of that action and bravery and courage that was demonstrated, it almost built something that it's almost for the first time, he's an immigrant, like many migrant, he said almost like the first time I feel I belong to this country, because it's now my country. I'm pushing something, I'm getting something, I understand how these things work. We have a very complex counting, preference counting when it comes to the voting, where you number the people. It's not like whoever comes at the top. It's a very complex, system. People engage in those kinds of actions. And so reminded me of one story just very quickly. And that story is that they say, I think it's some sort of, I think it's from somewhere in Africa. I'm not sure who said it, but it's a story. Is there was in the jungle lions, and they were attacked by another lions, and they were killed, slaughtered. Except one young lion, the mother gave him a birth just a moment before the attack and pushed him into the bush to hide him from the attack. So he survived. And after a while, there was a group of sheep that came around, and they saw young lion sitting there in the bush, and they took him with him and raised him and so on. They taught him the language, ba, the grass eating and so on. So when he grew up and everything, that group of sheep, they were attacked now by lions. And so as they were slaughtering the lambs and massacring everybody, the lion, by that time grown lion, was shaking. He was horrified what he's seeing. And a big lion came to him, and he's looking at him like, what is this guy doing? So he takes a piece of the lamb and he shoves it in his mouth, And he's like horrified. No, I can't eat. I'm vegetarian. These are my brothers and sisters. But as he starts swallowing the meat, he's get this different sensation. What is this? Like, I've never experienced this before. So the big lion takes him for the head and brings him to the water, and he put his head down to see reflection of himself in the water. And so he realized he's not a sheep, he's a lion. And he screams this roar, And so sometimes people around you, they want the best for you. They might not be there to get you or to make you to be a sheep like them. But nevertheless, you realize, you have to realize that you are not a sheep. No matter environment things, at one point in time, you realize that you are a lion. You can do more than just what the other sheep can do. You are, and this is where that verse comes in. You are the nation of lions brought to do these things. You need to realize you're not a vegetarian. You're not eating grass. You're not you understand?
Cattle being
you're not helpless.
Yeah.
You should not be trembling in these difficult situations, losing. You should be like Yusuf, thinking, seeing, working, taking care of the business, protecting.
We're the shepherds of the community.
The shepherds, Yeah. So this is what the bigger picture is. This is the whole different mentality that you want to awaken.
I think with the lion and the sheep metaphor, you're trying to imply that, hey, we as Muslims, we should realize what we have. What we have is a lot to offer. And one of the things I did want to ask you is Islamic finance, how can it benefit so much more than or so many more than just our Muslim communities, whether it's local communities or on the global scale. Before we get to that, I did want to ask for your definition of what Islamic finance is. We talked about how you found yourself in economics, and then how the principles or the prohibitions and the ethics of Islam play into economics. But how do you define it? What is Islamic finance? Is it totally different from what we're used to in the conventional system? Your insight on that.
When I think about Islamic finance, I think about it as a way of conducting trade, commerce. It is connected with, as a normal finance. It is connected with us. I sometimes think about it almost as an engine that is actually there to run the rest of the economy, where you are actually producing things. So if you think about economy where you get things that you need, then the finance is the engine behind that works to make that happen. So you have entrepreneurs who will hopefully solve your problem. So then you have the way that finance plugs into that. And so the way that finance plugs into that is it could be through interest-based transaction, debt-based or equity-based transactions. But it's basically this relationship between you and money, or people with the money and yourself, through different tools that basically then encourages entrepreneurship. So I see the finance Islamic is, of course, we could say simple definitions, the finance and transaction that are complying with Islamic on the transactional level, right? They're complying with Islamic principles of how something should be done, that it should be transparent, there should be no cheating, it should avoid certain prohibitions and so on. But at maybe higher level, it's a way that you think about how am I creating a relationship between participants, between people with the money and people who are actually producing that in our economy. And so it's this relationship. This relationship often that Islamic finance defines in products and services, in from people buying the home or people financing the business. It's that link usually that where Islamic finance sort of sits. And how this feeds into the broader worldview, Islamic worldview, is that it is a fairer relationship. It's a relationship that puts us both on the same side, financier and the entrepreneur. We are on the same side. And, sometimes I have a business people, so I try to explain it in a simple way for them. Just the other day I had a client, they were builders. They build real estate buildings and stuff like that. And then they want to switch from conventional to this. And they say, can we do the contract like this? And can we do like that? And they say, okay. And I said, let me explain to you a very simple idea, and then you work it through in your case, Idea here is that you have a money. What do you do with money? Think of it as a seed. You put it in the ground. It grows the tree. On that tree, there is an apple. You eat the apple. That's your profit. So what Islamic finance or Islam as idea is, it wants you that your money and that apple are connected. As soon as I divorce that money, that seed, from that apple that came from that seed, and I say to you, no, you put the seed here, but I'll give you profit from the apple from somewhere else. So now that simply starts not to make sense. So you eat from the fruit of your own work, from the fruit that your work and your money produces. And that's only what is fair. Why would you eat from the other tree? Because the question that they came was, okay, can we just give me $1 million and then we'll just make a return based on some other project? Well, why would the return be based on another project and he give you for this project? So he give you for this tree to grow apple tree and have apples, and then you say, but I'll give you from... You see, this is how we are thinking. We are not partners in business. We are already on the different sides of business. Now that itself creates opportunities and does not align us to make this tree successful. So for some reason now my partner has more interest in this tree being successful, and I don't even care about this tree being successful because nobody is tied to this tree anymore. Yeah. But we are saying we are investing in this tree. Yeah. You understand? Where is the stakeholder? Yeah. And where is the governance, and where are the incentives that aligns us with this? So you have to understand this relationship. When you break this relationship, that's why these big banks don't really care, because they will take your money regardless. Yeah. Because they don't care how's losing money, you losing. They don't care what's happening. There is no moral or ethical or anything arrangement that they need to think about you. They just take your that pound of flesh. So how does that extract in the larger economic? Well, you have all of these extractive colonial projects that just look at everything else to extract the wealth. They extract the time and the wealth from the worker and from other nations. So how would we do that? Well, you genuinely work with other countries and people. And that's what I'm saying. Do we need a global leadership? Because remember, Yusuf, he's not just saying, I'm going to be successful. I mean, he's dealing with the government that was oppressive to him, that put him in the jail, that, the brothers that tried to kill him. So he's the first one to have a reason to say, all of you go to hell. What you did to me, I'm gonna get my share, and I'm gonna be laughing and tell you I told you so after you are suffering. So I will get my revenge. No, he's looking at even the people who least deserve. This is about stability. This is about doing the right thing. And so going back to the example of President Erdogan, for example, because it's very important to connect this practically, who is doing something along those lines. So President Erdogan, for example, and this has so many layers, but one is what we are talking about. He, for the first time, opened embassies in every major capital in Africa. Before that, it was very superficial relationship. So he started sending the trade delegations in Africa. He's starting investing. He's bringing scholarship of the students. My daughter, for example, studied in Istanbul, and she had students from all around the world sponsored by Turkey. They learn language, they go there. Even from Bosnia, I met the students. I gave a talk in Istanbul to Bosnian students. They're studying engineering, medicine, whatever, And so look at that. They are connecting students, trade delegation, and they are having diplomatic relationship. Turkey sent, for example, recently in Somalia, a delegation to mediate between two warring factions, by bringing mediator who brought them together, and they solved the problems, and that allowed for then brotherly exchange and building society and economic benefit, versus some other negotiators, how they solve that problem. They give arms to one group that fights the other one and brings the war and destruction. So this whole idea of partnership, mutual cooperation that underpins the transactions, underpins the system, and underpins then the nations that cooperate in that region. The idea is that we will all rise up with the rise in tide, and so this is the idea. This is how we sort of make ourselves also more secure. This is what the world is crying for. That the world is crying for different kind of leadership now. You have this world where we are between China being superpower or America being superpower. None of these powers are trusted. What are you going to do once you get that power? There is no mechanism to control the impulses, worst impulses of the power. Because more somebody is powerful, more questions arises how you're going to keep that in check. I was saying to my son, we were discussing, and I said, Allah forbade injustice to himself. Why? Because this is any time you deal with the power and somebody deals with the powerful, what's the first concern that they have? It's how will I be treated? I don't have a power in this relationship. So when you have a big relationship, what is it that they're communicating? Everybody is scared. Oh, this power, if they take, if that's power, I'll be down, and look at history and so on. And you have this 80% of the world fragmented, searching for that Yusuf, who will collect it. And that could be a block. That could be a block of people who cooperate, who have relationships and so on. And that goes beyond. Look at South Africa, what they have done as a result of what's happening in Palestine. How many, they are now being attacked for that. Even the Muskel, manipulate the grok data to fake the story, what's happening there. And so they are singled out. And so imagine now the world where these countries stick together. Mm-hmm. And they did stick together when Trump came. Look, there is already that thing happening. When Trump said, okay, I'm going to go take Canada, take Greenland, all of these countries, and no, you won't. No, you won't. In fact, you are the beneficiary of this system, world global system that you created. It benefited you the most. Your currency is now a reserve currency of the entire world. The reason why you don't have the impact that you should realistically have from dollarizing entire world is because everybody's still accepting it. But we've seen this week Moody downgraded American credit rating to -A. So now, imagine what would that do if American debt and American treasury and all of these bonds that feed the machine suddenly start sliding down as the just repayment on American debt is now $1 trillion. As the countries now start to say, you know what, it was great to use American dollar in time of war, because many of the countries in the world, when they have a war, they rely on American dollar as a stable currency when everything else falls. But now they're saying, rather than American currency being stable in many of these countries that used to look up to America, they say now American currency is being weaponized.
Yeah.
American system, financial system that they used to clear the international payment is now being weaponized. And now we're going to de-dollarize our economy because we can't deal with this influx of money when you do quantitative easing and then money going out during the tapering times, and then this creates the shocks and instability. Plus, you're now putting the tariffs, now they are on and off, now you're attacking us, now you're taking over us, now you become irrelevant, not just irrelevant, you become unpredictable. We cannot trust what you're saying. So the countries that used to think, America is the leader of the free world and the home of the free and brave people who have a justice in everything that they move. This illusion that used to be after Second World War, that really did make America great, because they used this capital, this illusion that they created, and to build the products for the people. And so they were not coercing people. People wanted to buy washing machine and microwave for America and the car and the pop culture and all of that, because they won the world. You have an average European household consume 90% American
products,
ideas, movies,
Sure.
Entertainment, ideas in English. And then that led to commerce. But now, it's a different story. Now you are resorting to coercing people, to pushing them through the war, through propping up systems and ways which don't make any sense. It's not anymore what America used to think, freedom and everybody, capitalism is freedom to do things and let the market sort itself and supply and demand. There is not any more invisible hand of the market. The hand is very visible, and it's very forceful.
Bullying.
And we don't like it.
I'm sorry.
It's a bully. It's a hand of the bully,
Yeah.
So this is restructuring entire system that we are having. People are looking for different alliances. People are finding, who do we trust? How do we go? Because we don't know what's next.
Yeah. When economists or Muslim economists speak about Islamic finance, I think a lot of a lot of the time when they're talking about it, it may be in the theoretical. Is Islamic finance supposed to exist in parallel with the existing conventional system, or is it supposed to be an alternative to it, or is it supposed to work within what we have in place, or a totally different paradigm?
Or consume it.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a very important question and observation.
And if I could just add one thing.
Yeah.
The last 100 years we've been living in as Muslims, maybe even a little bit longer than that, I would say is probably a lot different than for centuries how Muslims lived and how their economic model was. And that's not to say that for 1300 years the Islamic economy didn't develop and look different ways, but for the last 100 years I'd imagine that it's totally alien compared to what it was when before we had these modern nation states and the post World War I arena. So that being said, do we have a model that we would revert to, that we would call an Islamic economy model, or is it something that we as Muslims living in this 21st century have to think about creating something totally new, or something that would look a little different than what we had in the past?
It's a very complex question. It's a very deep question. And the way I would think about it is, when I was born in Bosnia, so growing up in Bosnia, going to school, you learn to speak Bosnian language, just like anybody else in their own native country. And you don't really study the grammar. You don't think about how the sentences are formed. Like, for example, the way we speak in Bosnian language, how the language starts. And for example, if I look at the Turkish language, the beginning of our sentence is the end of the sentence in Turkish. They restructure the sentence completely up one way and opposite, And every language would have its own little things. When I started going to school, I hated the grammar. I hated to think about it, It's only later when I appreciate the language more that I start thinking about the grammar, and when I start learning other languages, and that something like grammar became a subject of interest. The grammar is there for the people who usually don't have that, to reconstruct the original idea. Okay? So when you have something and when you do something, it becomes part of you. You don't necessarily think about it. So think about economics. For much of the history, we have the system. We are the system. We know what is happening. It comes intuitively, like a speaking language without the grammar. Now, when we now say, and that's why, by the way, Americans they are not obsessed, how do they call their system? As long as they are the top, they make most money, they produce everything, they are good, right? They don't worry how you call it. You can call it potato if you want. So now we are in this situation where we suddenly have, let's say, a couple of dominant thoughts, systems, names. And so now we are trying from the non-speaking economic language to start restructuring our way of, okay, what are our words, how we form sentences, what is the rules of grammar to put these sentences together. And so this is where idea comes of what is our system. And everybody will have their own sort of thoughts. I had a little experiment where I supposedly presented the way I would structure the grammar of our Islamic economic system. And I call it shepherd's economy, based on our tradition and how it collects different pieces into the whole, so that all pieces of economy will be there together. And so I think sometimes in between what is this ideal now and the grammar, purity of the grammar, and then how the people speak it on the ground, So if you think about it, I don't speak that language. Now I'm using the app to get to the language with this grammar. Now you're not going to have from day one perfectly coherent language. Well, what are the building blocks of economy as a language? And so when I speak often to people about Turkey, and I say Turkey is a great example, case study for us to analyze if we are thinking as a Muslims. Let's say 50 Muslim countries. Where you are now, where you want to be, I say, look at this. This is the excellent case study. So somebody would always say, but Turkey is not Islamic country. They don't have a Sharia. They don't have this. They don't have that. Whatever. I say, I know. I understand that part. But what you have, what they do right, is the parts of what Islamic economy should be doing right. Take those things. Don't worry about embedded other structural things in the system. These ignore these. But like what you should be looking for. For example, rather than going full on theoretical, they can feed their people. All right? You tell me in Islamic economic system we shouldn't be able to feed our people. Is that should we feed our people or depend on others to feed us or not being able? So a very simple idea. Can your system feed your people? Very simple idea. It's not theoretical or something. So when we say upper hand or something sufficient and being so on, so Turkey has now exports to about 200 countries, almost 2,000 different products. In the middle of the winter, they have fresh produce because their fields are producing 3-4 times a year the fresh produce. So if we move down to now Syria, okay, now the north of Syria, 2 million people work in agriculture. They are now want, with the help of Turkey and investments, to bring that sector to be at 10 million people employed in agriculture, bring the machinery, bring the technology. That north of the Syria can feed entire Middle East. Now that is Islamic. Whatever you want to call it. Don't think about the rest of the system and pieces, but this legislation, something. These are the blocks, because think about just from this, if most of our other countries, just think about they cannot even feed themselves. In Lebanon, they're fighting. There is a war fighting. They don't have electricity. Banks are not working. Everything is collapsing. In Egypt, all of the investment, they sold their ports and the resorts and billions of dollars. Nobody's going. In Pakistan, they took another billions of dollars from IMF. Why are these IMF billions of dollars coming to our countries now? Because you're not producing anything. You are now needing somebody's money, and you will use that to buy food from
someone else,
another country that does produce. So now in 12 months, you will produce nothing, you will consume that money, you will have a debt, and you will make another country richer that was feeding you. So what is in next 12 months, another strategic plan for you? Again, a new loan, like how long this is going to go for? I mean, if you are the China, you're looking at this, you say, look, I will produce now the most synthetic, cheapest food that is crap, not healthy, just to feed these people, make most of the money because they have no alternative. So expand that now to everything else. From your defense, to your technology, to education, to the infrastructure, building of the roads, energy independence. These are the critical components so that you can then, theorize like how's this system go. You need to have components of the system that is you are independent. What you consume, your economy is producing. And you hope that participants in that economy do it ethically, do it in the right way. They're following the ethics principles. So as you build on these things, you can create whatever you put a label. This is Islamic market of Medina here. Okay, but what are you doing? Like what are you doing? What's the impact that you're making? So if you go to some of the cities, like in my documentary, I, for example, visit city of Kayseri in Turkey, which is an entrepreneurial center, they have so strong culture of business. They even go, and you go to Kayseri and they say, we have a saying, and I was talking with one of the, I think he's almost like a vice chancellor of university, and he's now invested in 100 startups there. But in that country, in this city, they joke, like if you can't make it in business, you go to university. Not that they are uneducated or don't value education, but they are just saying, as they say in English, if those who don't know how to do, they teach. But they really have that spirit of entrepreneurship. And so even this professor, he is entrepreneur, and he took me to a couple of factories and so on. And so when I saw this center of 1,000 factories in one zone, how they're making, how they're working, how they, and talking with one of the factory owners, you see that once you start on that journey, there is so much coming to realization from that story. We said, lion awakening. And even one of the factories owner was telling me, like when they started years ago, this factory that produced electrical cables, he said, in the past, we would buy this machine from Europe. And then whenever problem happened, we have to fly engineer from Europe on business class and then pay them and delays and whatever, It took decades until we train our people, build our own machines, build our own capacity, make it streamlined, more efficient, everything, And you can see the pride, you can see and you go to another factory, they are now producing those machines there. They put a consortium of factories, they're building electric car, like better than Tesla, And so these are the building steps. You need to build, train. Sometimes these questions, they just assume, just like they are consumed by labels, not the substance behind it, not the steps. They just want to go to the end result. I just want to be here and then make sure that it's all okay. Yeah, we all do, but there is a reality. As you do that, somebody wants to interrupt you. Somebody want to put tariffs on you. Somebody want to crash your economy. Somebody is weaponizing, just like America is doing same to China, sabotaging their success. Whatever the reason, whether we agree or disagree, but they're not going to leave them alone from just going. And so that's why Turkey has to expand in different regions. Just like China is building one road, Silk Road Initiative, $1 trillion worth in all of these countries, is to prevent, to secure. As one of the scholars say, we sometimes take a step in one direction, then the politics moves us 2 steps back. So we have to now involve in economics and politics and so many different things to secure where we came to, the positions. Because this is now a system, and the people and systems, they have interests. So if you cannot, again, part of your foresight, if you cannot read how those systems now start interact, how those alliances interacting and so on, other system or other alliance, especially now when we are seeing rise of the different blocks. We have to have something in the hand, bring it on that table, and build those alliances in partnership. But you can only build a partnership if you have something in the hand to put on the table. Otherwise, what am I partnering with you on? You have nothing to partner with. So this is how we sort of take step by step, and that's why sometimes when the scholars are just discussing in a pure abstract, without actually looking at specifics and how that's going to unfold and look for examples. I don't care Turkey is not a perfect country. I'm not interested in the whole country. I'm interested, are there case studies, building blocks that I can learn and say, well, this is how Pakistan should follow. This is how Indonesia should follow. I was recently in Indonesia, and then most of their food come from US. Some of the staple food, grains and things like that come from the United States. I was shocked. I was in the central Java, 4 hours traveling through Porto area, where all green, yet you cannot produce your own stuff that you yourself eat. It comes from US. Like, I could not believe it. I could not believe that this was the level. So then somebody is going to tell me about Islamic economy, this and that. Like, come on, be serious. Like, do what you can. Frame yourself just out of self-respect. Out of self-respect.
SubhanAllah.
Out of your own sense of dignity that your food come from your people. Your investment go to make jobs in your country. Indonesia first, whatever you want to call it, I don't know. But like, come on, we cooperate, we do these things, fine. But don't depend. Strategically, it's dangerous. That's the lesson of these last few years, that you have to have these supply chains close to you, especially the things that are of strategic importance. This is the building block. This is how strategically we think about Islamic economy, not just purely some kind of a checklist.
I appreciate your outlook on it. I think it's very optimistic because it sounds like what you're saying is we don't wait for perfect conditions, or we don't wait till we have this perfect Islamic model constructed before we go out and we do.
Guide, you just go page one, page two.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the building. The thing that's like,
I will have to go before we continue. I will have to go very quickly. So if you learn, maybe we can continue unpacking this in the next episode.
Inshallah.
So in a few minutes, I've got to go.
Sure.
So if you want to,
I thought it's
maybe
very
we
good.
can wrap up.
Inshallah. I thought it was a very good point to wrap up on, inshallah. Just a couple quick thoughts. Like, again, subhanAllah, like for me, I feel like I just went to school. Like, subhanAllah, honestly, like, mashallah. Like, you feel like you reduce Islamic finance to, we talked about this when we were talking about the podcast name, and we were hesitant to use the word finance because people think of it as just literally like the rules of a simple transaction. Like finance is like loans, murabaha, mudaraba, musharaka, whatever, and that's it. And essentially Islamic finance is, as we mentioned the ayah from before, it's like a system put together so that we can control our own economy, so we can control what happens within our borders, so we can be influential at the table on what can influence us from outside, and taking the necessary steps throughout to be in that position. SubhanAllah, you're saying, like, just do you feed yourself? Can you feed yourself?
It's a cornerstone of civilization.
Yeah. And it's amazing because then you think about it, and this is not to take away from the specific fiqhi matters at all, but that becomes like the technicalities. That's not the big picture. The big picture is, if Islam, Muslims are supposed to have the upper hand, what type of economic ingenuity and drive should we be at, and should we be developing to be at the forefront for that? SubhanAllah, like that's just amazing. And earlier you were mentioning about the morals and the ethics, etc. And I remember, like, part of the reason why, like, the subhanAllah, from the wisdoms of some of the simple rules of Islamic finance and transactions is that, like, because if I'm unjust to my brother, how am I going to go 20 minutes later and go make salah next to him? How am I going to look him in the eye, and how am I going to invite him to my house? And how is he going to come and see me when I'm sick? How are we going to have that relationship when I'm cheating you and I'm being dishonest, or I'm being oppressive to you in a financial situation? And then obviously, therefore, if we honestly believe that Islam is the best way, the best methodology, the truth, the way to elevate us from darkness to light, not just Muslims but throughout the whole world, then it gives us the bigger drive to be at the table, to influence people, like Ustad Cholan was saying, that Yusuf ﷺ could have easily been like, forget you guys, you guys all did me wrong. But no, because you have that higher drive of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, and to do good and advise the people and help them with their situation, we have the solutions. We should be there to provide them with those solutions and those answers. Like, it's like, for me, it's like mind-blowing. This is like total intellectual thought process.
It's much greater than just self-enrichment.
Yeah.
It's really truly, subhanAllah, a risala, a message that we're given.
And that is a very important observation we can maybe unpack next time. When person is consumed by self-enrichment, how shallow and narrow that vision is. How that brings the likes of Andrew Tate, who from Bugatti create a golden calf to worship, and you think you are breaking the matrix, where you are actually deeply embedding yourself in the deepest layers of the same system that you think you worshipping the system then. So these foolish ideas that are being sold as the solution, glorification of the wealth and misunderstanding what the real impact is, what the real thing is. And that's why I said, you can have a countries give a 3 trillion, zero impact. And you can have a group of people give a peanuts and they have a massive impact. It's just fundamentally not really understanding how the power works, how the reality works. What makes a lion lion? What makes a sheep sheep? Sheep is not because it's standing on the golden calf, have a Bugatti, you can still be a major sheep, So these are the things that people, real leadership, real sense of masculinity, real sense of what men should be doing, or Muslims, or what the family should be structured as communities, and so these are very, very deep things that deal with the entire worldview, how we see reality for what it is, and how it interconnects with the rest of the pieces and the layers in the world that we are trying to walk in.
Inshallah, definitely. I'm super excited. Inshallah.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
Obviously in that there's a lot of hints of like unpacking, the downfalls and the shortcomings of, like you're saying, this capitalistic, individualistic society, looking at some of the other systems out there as well and their shortcomings. But yeah, these deep things. Like I even wanted to go on the tangent, and you mentioning, I asked you about the 4 building blocks, and you were talking about like people think it's simple, just lobbying, putting up money here, or I wanted to unpack that. Or that's like probably another several hours of discussion, because there's so much to learn from that as well. But yeah, inshallah, we'd love to start unpacking that as well, inshallah, in terms of what are the system, what is the goals. Or what are we actually serving, as you were mentioning? What's our ultimate purpose, inshallah, and how we can execute that, inshallah, in a way that's pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Ustaz Cholan, Jazakallah khair. It's been a pleasure and more to have you join us from the land down under, as they call it. Thanks again for being with us. Just to conclude with a short dua. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Jazakallah khair.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, inshallah. And we look forward to it, inshallah.
Until next time, inshallah. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.